Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time. Hide your discourse. There's a new Quentin Tarantino movie in town.
Hey! You're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This week we are doing a review of Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. 9th is dubious because he counts Kill Bill as one movie, even though it's kind of two. But we're not here for semantics. We are here to review Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what is arguably the most hotly anticipated movie of the summer, now that all the Avengers stuff has started to come out. I want to preface this review by establishing a couple of key points. Key point one is that I like Quentin Tarantino. I like his films quite a bit. So any criticism that you hear in this video is not from like a casual hater. Like, this is coming from someone who genuinely loves his work, likes most of his movies, almost all of them really. I even have my Quentin Tarantino power rankings right here for you to check out. And the thing about Quentin Tarantino, especially today, like here in 2019, is that he is a filmmaker whose work tends to get people to argue quite a bit. Especially if you're someone who spends a lot of time on film Twitter or anywhere on the internet where movies are discussed. He's just sort of a firebrand. He's a filmmaker it's not even fair to call him controversial, really, I think, anymore. It's just most people either love his work so dogmatically that they cannot accept any kind of criticism, or they hate the very idea of him to such a degree that it's very difficult for them to notice even when things in his films are good. I've written about him on the internet several times before. I think he's not, I don't know if I put him in my top 5 directors, but definitely like my top 10. But he is one of my top 5 like screenwriters in terms of people who are currently working today. There's this trend in modern film criticism, I think, where a lot of people are so driven to make sure that the people reading and consuming their work understand that like they're not like bad people, that they tend to waste a lot of their word count establishing with the reader that they are aware of problematic elements of the film they're seeing, reviewing, or the actors in it and stuff. And I myself fall for this sometimes too, where I feel like I have to establish to anyone watching or listening or reading or whatever that like, hey, I know this thing about that person that's bad and why people don't like them. I get that. I'm not going to do that in this video because I would assume that if you're watching this and you follow me, you know me and my relationship with different filmmakers and stuff, and I just assume that you assume that like you know that I know what is shitty about Quentin Tarantino. Like, I'm not going to preface it with all this stuff. Like, we can just accept that we both know these things and move on from there. So, I did like this movie. I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood quite a bit. I don't know where I'd rank it in Quentin Tarantino's filmography. I'm probably going to have to watch it again and, like, kind of take a little more time with it, honestly, before I start thinking in those terms. But it's a very strong film, I think. It's a sweet movie for much of the runtime. It's funny. It's very funny. It's pretty well shot. It's very well acted. Like all the superlatives you expect from a movie like this. It's also really long. It's like 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and like you guys know, like long movies are like a pet peeve of mine. I've been working my way through the entire Bond filmography from the start and onward, and like every review I put on Letterboxd of it is like, this is too long. So I'm gonna look like an asshole defending a 3-hour Quentin Tarantino movie right now. But even though the film's very long, I don't think it's unnecessarily long. When Hateful Eight came out, that movie was like pushing, like, you know, it felt like a 4 or 5 hour movie. And every time I watched it, I just felt like this could have been shorter. I don't know what I would have cut. I don't know what I would have taken out. I don't know where I would have shorn it. But I feel like this needed to be a less long movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, all the things that I knew intellectually should be cut, all the things about the film that I think should have been shortened, I didn't really want shortened or cut. Like, I liked the fact that the movie was kind of this like hazy hangout picture. I know that some people have compared it already to Pulp Fiction because it's like a contemporary movie about regular people driving around in cars. There's not like as much of a genre element, although Pulp Fiction was crime, but it's, you know, like that type of thing. And I don't know if that's quite fair. I think this is even more laid back than Pulp Fiction. Like, of every film in Quentin Tarantino's filmography, I think Jackie Brown probably comes the closest to having this sort of pacing, where they are able to spend a lot more time on minutia and little moments between characters. But this movie is even more stretched out, because like Jackie Brown at least has like a heist to build around. This doesn't have that either. This is just, well, let's get into the plot, right? Leonardo DiCaprio stars as Rick Dalton, a former television star in the late 60s who used to be kind of a big deal, and now he's slowly fading into obscurity. His only real friend is Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, who's his stuntman and also sort of his best friend. Now that he's not getting as much work where he needs a stuntman, he just finds things for Cliff to do, and like they hang out all the time. He's like his driver, like fix stuff around the house. They're just like buds. he's in this really depressing part in his career where, like, he's starting to realize that shit's going to be, like, over for him. It's unlikely he's ever going to, like, be who he used to be or be any bigger than he ever was. At the same time that Rick is making these observations about his own existence, Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski move in next door to where he lives, and Sharon Tate's obviously, like, one of the hottest actresses at the time. Roman Polanski just made Rosemary's Baby at this point in the film, his history, and, like, they're, you know, it's... The contrast is pretty obvious what's going on, right? The basis of the film is that you're following Rick and Cliff around LA and Rick's alcoholism and Cliff's kind of steely chillness and stuff. And then you're casually intercutting that with Sharon Tate just going around existing and, like, being, like, this beam of sunshine. This person who is, like, on her way to being, like, a megastar and is, like, super happy and life's going great for her. And the camera just kind of drifts between these two stories, like, back and forth. It's a very weird structure. And then, obviously, also, the movie is, you know, because the dates in 1969, you know that this is around the time that Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson family. So the Manson family, a lot of those, like, side hippie characters start to creep into the narrative as well. So it creates this tension, and, like, we know we're all careening towards this climax about this horrifying historical event. That's, like, the crux of the whole movie. I will not spoil anything in the movie beyond those basics, okay? To be fair, there's not a lot of plot to spoil. It is a movie that is largely somewhat plotless. I would say it's character-driven, but it's not even really driven by character. It's really driven more by, like, mood and, like, tone and feel. And the movie is just flashbacks and cutaways to films that characters were in, or references to things, and needle drops, and these little moments where, like, music is, like, non-diegetic because Tarantino picked it for the mood of a scene, and then all of a sudden it's diegetic because it's happening in a scene. It is, like, the most free-form and experimental of any of his movies. Obviously, several of his films are non-linear, but this movie isn't non-linear like the story's told out of order. It's non-linear like someone is telling a story, and then that involves showing a film that they were in, and then it involves showing them on the set of that film, and then other moments, and it just beeps and backs and forth. It's very odd, and it's an odd thing to do for, like, 3 straight hours. But it works. I mean, for me anyway. I think some people might watch it and think there's just not enough narrative there. I'm definitely the kind of person who sometimes feels very frustrated without, like, an airtight structure to grasp onto in a long movie. But I don't feel that here, honestly. From the minute we meet these guys, and the minute we start to see this recreation of old Hollywood, and, like, the loving way that Tarantino, like, frames and shoots things, it's hard not to get swept up in it, man. Like, if you love movies and you love that era and stuff, like, it's really easy to get sucked into it. Now, that's not enough, I think, for most people to want to see a movie, right? Like, one of the biggest criticisms of Quentin Tarantino is that he's kind of an indulgent filmmaker, that he cares about, like, his favorite movies, his favorite scenes, his favorite actors, his favorite songs, and his favorite female body parts. There's a stigma around what this man chooses to film all the time, okay? Like, I get it. I totally get it. And if those things annoy you about his work, you are going to be annoyed about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There are plenty of shots of dirty white feet on dashboards and seats. There is plenty of songs and stuff that you recognize from key moments in pop cultural history. There's tons of references to other movies and things that I didn't fucking understand either, because I'm like, I was not 6 years old like Quentin Tarantino was in 1969. I don't know what TV shows were on the air. It's not like other movies where it's like, oh, I can kind of go quick and Google, and I know some of these movies, I know where he's going from. This was a lot more deep cut for me, personally. One of the criticisms, I think, of the way Tarantino uses, like, nostalgia and references and homage is that that's all he does, that he just sort of cherry plucks things from his past and things he likes and just, like, remixes them and pretends he made something new, and that's not true. I mean, he's telling original stories, and he's writing original characters, and he's creating original sequences and scenes and dialogue. And then the other background stuff is those things. You know what I mean? And it's the mixture and the interplay between the two where I think a lot of the magic comes from. And I think that if you only interact with the level of his work that's just, I don't like the fact that it's violent, I don't like the fact that this happens, I don't like the fact that this is just referencing this. Like, every filmmaker references fucking movies he likes. Just most people are a lot more, like, subtle about it. Quentin Tarantino doesn't bother. That's, like, the biggest, I think, key difference. And here, I feel like that nostalgia is very different. I think that when he's, like, making a spaghetti western out of, like, a revenge slavery movie, a lot of people, you know, I can understand why they would have issues with that, because it feels kind of gleeful and weird about, like, a horrible historical thing. And this is also about a horrible historical thing, and there is a glee to the way the movie is made, but it's not only glee. Like, there's a lot of melancholy here. There's a weird kind of sadness, where it's not only Quentin Tarantino feeling sad this era of Hollywood has gone by, right? It's not only nostalgia for 35mm prints. It's not only missing the movie star-driven era and stuff. A lot of what he seems to be talking about is also contemporary. At least that's how I read it. Some people may be going into this movie assuming that Quentin is moving further and further away from genuine criticisms of his modern work, and like that he's not engaging with the conversation about how he rates women or how he doesn't rate certain things or race or different stuff. And I feel like that completely overlooks Hateful Eight, which had a lot of very interesting things to say about post-racial America. And I think this doesn't deal with race stuff as much. There's no like awkward inward bombs, just for you guys who are aware. But I don't know what to say about it yet, because I just watched the movie a few hours ago and I haven't really fully wrestled with it, but there's stuff in here that makes me think that he in some way is trying to say something, or at least engage with parts of the Me Too conversation. There's just, I don't know what, I don't want to spoil the movie, but there are little things in the narrative about a couple of main characters' past that come up, and immediately I was like, whoa, that's like really blatant, like one-to-one thing to what you're being criticized for in the press right now. So I kept watching that subplot thinking it was going to go somewhere, and like it never did. So I don't know if that was just like unintentional, or like you don't realize you're just thinking about this thing all the time and it enters into your work, but that was weird. I mean, if you watch Death Proof knowing everything we know about his relationship with Uma Thurman, and what happened on the set of Kill Bill, a lot of things in that movie seem like it's like Quentin trying to like exercise guilt in some fashion. I feel like that's just there. You can't escape that. I feel like Hateful Eight, a lot of that is like him wrestling with like the way race is in America, but this is not a person that anyone wants to see talk about race relations in America. So it's very, you know, like blunt and violent and stuff, but it's there, and I think it's palpable, right? This isn't really like wrestling or like reconciling with Quentin Tarantino's place in Hollywood and what women think of him. More so, it seems to prove that he's like aware of it. And I don't know that it's better for someone to be aware of something but not have anything to say about it, or if I just couldn't figure out what he wanted to say about it at all. But it comes out in the movie, and it's just there. It's just out there for you to kind of like deal with. I know some people are going to be coming to this movie wondering about Sharon Tate and Margot Robbie's performance as Sharon Tate. And the fact that a lot of people who saw it at Cannes felt she didn't have a lot of dialogue. And she doesn't. She has an uncharacteristically low amount of spoken dialogue for a person in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Just period. But it's like on purpose, and I don't know that having more dialogue would actually make her role in the film better. I think her role in the film is just not what people expected it to be. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. What I sort of expected from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I did not get, is also what I expected from Django, which didn't happen there either, which is that when Inglourious Basterds came out, I remember when I read the screenplay, like every Quentin Tarantino movie except this movie, the screenplay has leaked onto the internet like a year or so before the movie is even made. Like I read Kill Bill, everything from Kill Bill onward, every Quentin Tarantino movie I read on the internet before I ever saw it or was cast or whatever. This is the first movie I went into blind, I guess. And in Inglourious Basterds, when I first read the script, I was taken by the fact that I thought this was just going to be a basic, big, like, guy shoot 'em up about the bastards. But the movie is, like, barely about the bastards, and it's much more about Shoshana, and the narrative sort of splits its time between Shoshana and the bastards. And I think that that middle spot between the two of them kind of interconnecting is what makes the movie really unique and special. When I read the script for Django, I thought Django was going to do the same thing between Django and King Schultz, like him becoming a bounty hunter, and then Broomhilda's experiences being a slave woman, right? Like, I thought that it was going to be the same thing, and there's a little bit more in the script stuff with Broomhilda that's not in the movie, but not quite as much as like what Shoshana got in Bastards, right? But I think that's a unique structure for a movie, and I think it's something that Tarantino did very well in Bastards. And in this, I sort of felt like Rick and Cliff's world should have intercut with Sharon Tate's world differently. Like, it should sort of feel like two separate movies that are on a collision course. But it doesn't. It feels like one movie that's happening very slowly, almost as if the people involved in it like don't want to come to the conclusion very fast because they can feel like the end coming. And then this other like side movie that they keep glancing at, like off to the side, where the people involved have no idea that an end is ever going to happen. Like, Rick and Cliff, these guys are like has-beens, they're on their way out, like the world's changing around them, and they know it, and they're coming to terms with it, and it's kind of sad and melancholy. But Sharon Tate is like on top of the world. Everyone plays like on top of the world. Like, they have no concept even that things could just turn to shit eventually. And it's almost as if the film is saying that, like, we can sit and watch an entire scene, for instance, of Brad Pitt's character feeding his dog, which is a really good scene, but it really is just a long scene of a man putting dog food in a dish. Like that, we could sit with that, because even though it's just this very minor thing, there's so much like subtext, and like you just feel so much stuff watching it unfold. But anything that we could hear from Sharon Tate's story, like from the way they're framed, like almost doesn't matter. Like every time we do hear snippets of conversation, it's super casual, totally blasé. It's not like deep back and forth about pop culture and stuff. It's just like these people are just happy and they're just doing their thing and like whatever. Like almost like it's inconsequential, you know what I mean? And if this was actually a story about the Manson family and about Sharon Tate and stuff, that would be really insulting, obviously. But it's not really about those things. It's not really about the Manson family. It's not really about her death. It's really about Rick and Cliff, and about a changing of the guard, and about that time between two eras, you know? And that stuff is all really fascinating. It's just that I don't think it dovetails with the stuff involving the Manson family the way I would have liked it to. Like, I was pleasantly surprised by the way the third act goes. I'm not going to talk about it, obviously, but it's interesting. But after I left the theater, that was the part I was just kind of like whatever about. Like, I was like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. After seeing it, I guess. But all the other stuff before that, the stuff with Rick and Cliff and these guys, these movie sets that they used to feel like towering heroes on, and now they walk around, they know where to go or where things are, they just look lost. It really got to me. It actually really affected me. A lot of that is on DiCaprio and Pitt. They're both fantastic. DiCaprio is like, I've never seen him so like wounded and kind of pathetic. And I've never seen Brad Pitt so like cool and like just interesting, but then kind of mysterious and also a little bit weird once you find out more about him and stuff. Like, that's something for maybe a spoiler-filled review where someone wants to talk about the film after they've seen it, but I don't want to like get into that stuff. But it's an interesting movie. It's one of the only movies I can think of in Tarantino's filmography that spends so much time on like a basic male friendship. Like, there are friendships in other movies of his, and there are people who are like partners of convenience and things like that, but this has like a sweetness to it and like an honesty to it that I can't think of having seen in his other films. It's pretty stirring. Something I was unprepared for in the movie is that the last few Tarantino movies have all been westerns, right? Like Hateful Eight's a western, Django's a western. Like he's doing this like spaghetti western thing like a lot. This movie also has weird western overtones. Obviously, Rick Dalton got famous on a western on television, and he's about to be in a western movie, and he's auditioning for a western pilot. So there's a lot of West stuff, like fictional West stuff. But the way he films parts of Los Angeles, once it gets closer to like the other action, there's a part of it that almost feels like these guys are bygone cowboys in the West. You know what I mean? Like, so the title doesn't seem so ridiculous anymore. And I don't know. I thought it would be kind of corny. Like, once I realized it was happening, I was like, they're riding on horseback. I can kind of see where this is going. It did not feel as like cheesy and like obvious as I felt like it would. There were a lot of things in this movie that I don't want to say felt mature, because again, like he didn't grow in like a completely different storyteller or anything. But there is a maturity to the way the story is told, like a confidence in a way. Like, it doesn't seem as much like he's trying so hard to like, do certain things. It's just like, this is how I tell a story now, and this is the story I want to tell. And it's a little messier for that. It's a little bit less complete. It's a little bit less like perfect feeling. I'm gonna make a weird comparison. It kind of feels like if Inglourious Basterds was like his like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, this almost feels like his Yeezus. I know it's a super stupid weird thing to say, but like when Dark Twisted Fantasy came out, Kanye had made like something that, in his eyes anyway, it seemed like absolutely perfect. It was like, I know how to make the perfect fucking thing that you were going to like. And Inglourious Basterds in some respects feels like the closest to Tarantino being like the perfect kind of craftsman, you know? And when, after Dark Twisted Fantasy, when Kanye made Yeezus, the entire purpose of it was that it would not feel perfect. It would be messy. It would be all over the place. It would be loud. It would be brash. And this isn't loud and brash per se, but there's like a messiness to it that I really actually enjoy. Like, I like that it's not immediately a movie I would consider to be one of his best. I've always liked when filmmakers have movies that are kind of weird outliers, like aren't quite great, could have been better. Just seemed almost like odd ideas that aren't fully fleshed out. Like, I actually like that. I like just watching someone try to wrestle with stuff in their head the only way they know how, and just seeing what comes out. Obviously, for people that aren't a fan of his work, who would want to bother with that? But there's something about this movie that really, really got to me. I really liked it. Like, even though I don't think it's perfect, even though there's issues with it, I can't wait to see it again. And I very rarely actually feel like watching a movie a second time within like a week or so. That's pretty rare for me. And I think part of it, I hate to contribute to this narrative, but I think part of it is just that we don't really get a lot of movies like this in the mainstream anymore. Obviously, there's like so many different kinds of films the world over in independent cinema and like foreign countries and stuff. Like anywhere you want to find movies, different kinds of movies, you can find something for you. Like, I'm not pretending like Disney has already fully won, but to go see like a movie at the multiplex that has like $100 million budget and like doesn't have a bunch of like CGI superhero effects and stuff, and is kind of like a relic in a way, and it's kind of like a charming, indulgent, yes, a little curio from like a director dealing with all his personal preoccupations. I don't know, it's kind of nice. Like, I think if that came out all the time, I would be really annoyed with this movie. But considering that the last several movies I've seen in mainstream theaters have not touched me very much, I will take this sort of weird late Tarantino B-side over, like another big whatever else movie. It just, I don't know. It kind of bums me out a little bit that he says he's going to retire soon, because like I really like the way he writes, and I like the way he stages scenes and the way he chooses actors and different stuff. Obviously, the elephant in the room would be really great if Sally Menke never died. I mean, just because she's a person, you don't want people to not be alive anymore, but also because her work and the way they work together is like flawless. I mean, Fred Raskin's an okay editor, but every movie Tarantino's made since Sally passed has like been noticeably choppier and not quite the right rhythm. This is, I think, the closest Raskin comes in working with Tarantino to finding a really new rhythm with the two of them together. And it makes me a little bummed that they're probably going to make one more movie and then he's going to like give up for years because he's stubborn. Those are my feelings about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's harder to talk about the movie much deeper without spoiling the entire fucking thing. But I do think it's a movie that is worth seeing. I think even if you're someone who does not like Quentin Tarantino's work, I do still think if you can catch it for a cheap matinee and you can, wrestle with not giving that guy a lot of money or whatever, you should definitely see it. I know it's long. I know it might not be your cup of tea, but there are parts of it that I think will surprise you. And I don't just mean in like big swerve twist ways. I just mean it just feels different. And I think it's really special. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about it too, obviously, here in the comments in the video, or if you prefer, you can hit me up on Twitter, anywhere on the internet. I'd happily talk about this movie with you if you've seen it. I'll answer questions too if you haven't seen it and you want to decide whether or not you really want to watch it. I have no problem doing that as well. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, you can give it a thumbs down. That's totally acceptable. We're cool with that around here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe. I try to put up videos every week about movies, things I hope people want to listen to. And if you have subscribed already, please hit the bell icon so you can get notifications when I drop new videos. That's it. Yeah. Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks for watching, and bye.